Good morning, and thank you for joining Resilient You with Alicia Pozsony on Power 98.5 FM satellite radio. Each week on our show, we have guests that come on and talk about different experiences, strategies, and techniques around being more resilient. This week, we have a special guest, Dr. Heidi Schreiber-Pan. She is the founder and executive director at Chesapeake Mental Health. Heidi, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Now, I happen to stumble upon a concept that I have had no idea of, and I'm real excited to hear about it because I know our listeners, and we have listeners based out of the United States, Canada, as well as Europe. We broadcast out of Manchester, United Kingdom as well. So it's far-reaching. And here in the U.S., a lot of people, when they have trouble, they have stress or anxiety, they deal with it in not healthy ways, or they do go a more healthy route and go through counseling or different therapies. Why don't you tell us a little bit about services you offer and this wonderful new approach having to do with nature?
Yeah, sure. Well, I stumbled upon this field called positive psychology a few years back when I was in my doctorate program at Loyola University, and positive psychology was an interesting twist. So originally, psychology looks at what's wrong with people, give them a diagnosis, and figure out how we treat them. Positive psychology says, wait, there is a group of people that's actually doing really well, and they're resilient, even when difficult stressors hit them or that community, and they're bouncing back quicker than others. What do they have in common, and can I have some of that? So I got really interested in this group and in the research that was going on about positive psychology. And one of the elements that I found particularly interesting, because it resonated with me personally, was that people that had a higher connectedness to nature index. So we have scales that measure how connected people feel to nature. So if people were more connected to nature, they tended to be more resilient and had higher psychological well-being. So I was fascinated by that. And it resonated with me personally because I noticed that when I'm in a funk or in a difficult mood, or I've had troubling thoughts, or if it was just a mood dip, if I would go outdoors, and I would take a walk, or I would garden, or I would play with my dog in the yard, it was like a switch happened in my body. So I was like, what is this magic that's happening in the natural world? And my dissertation looked at the role of nature on psychological well-being, resiliency, and spirituality.
I love this. This touches on a lot of what I've been telling my clients and my listeners, using different techniques to deal with stress or troublesome situations, whether they have relationship issues or they have trouble like depression, like anxiety and things. And so I even put out a list on my blog for 100 ways to cope with stress. A lot of those outdoor activities you mentioned are on that list. Positive psychology, is that a new thing?
So it's relatively new if we think of the field in its entirety. So probably within the last 10 to 15 years, we've paid more attention to this idea of like, what do resilient people have in common? And is it a skill set, or is it something we're born with? And the more research we're doing into that is we're recognizing, and it's certainly a skill set that we can integrate to become more resilient. For example, another one that's somewhat related is the gratitude practice. What we know is people that have more gratitude practices or are more grateful in their own being, that they tend to be also more resilient. So resilient, right? If I just may talk a little bit about resiliency in itself. If we look at stress is this idea that our internal resources are not able to meet the demands. So if the demands become more than our internal resources, we experience what we call the stress response, right? So now we also know that stress is to some degree a healthy thing. We are humans, we're going to experience stress. But what resiliency says is that when we have these stressors that occur to us in our lives, resiliency helps us come back quicker. We're able to bounce back faster. We're able to look at the world from a place of sort of sufficiency, and that we're able to see things in a way where we can make meaning from the stressor in an easier way. And so when we're deeply connected with the natural world, what happens is, and this is a really intense one, intense concept, but it's this idea of ego diffusion. So ego diffusion is when we go into the natural world and we have this moment when we feel we're part of something bigger than ourselves. Right? It's just this sense of my own self, my ego, this importance that I put in my own self, and how everything revolves around just me. That sensation starts dissipating. And that is a really healthy thing for human beings, because we live in our heads way too much anyway. So when we can see a sunset and we're temporarily removed from our own ego, we feel like we're connected to something bigger than ourselves. That interconnectedness actually gives us the skill set that we're thinking of when we're talking about resiliency.
Yeah, that's true. And one of the things that, I've noticed is that, for example, I have one client and I'll suggest going for a walk, taking a pause, taking a break when they're either having a conflicting situation with a partner or a spouse. And there's things that if you take a deep breath, you go for a walk and you come back and you feel better. And this particular client was like, I never realized I could do that, set that boundary, and then actually do something for myself to give back by going for this walk. Because when he came back, he was feeling so much more light and he could think clearer and freer, not with that emotional attachment that he had when he was in the moment. So in your opinion, we know that we can do this ego diffusion, which is what happens when you detach from everything that we have in our house, all the social media, all the inputs that demands that are put on us in our roles in life and everything, and just go out and be with nature. Now, in terms of therapy, what type of services and techniques can help people?
Yeah, so we at the Chesapeake Mental Health, we advocate for taking clients outdoors, or at least into a outdoor environment, or we coach clinicians on how to design their offices so it feels like they're almost outside, but they're still inside. Because we have so many studies that support this beneficial effect. Now, we might do a walk and talk session, or we will set up 2 chairs that are by a little lake, or we will have people play with the sand or the earth in a kind of a herb garden that we've put together, or smell the different herbs, right? One of the things that causes human suffering is the amount of thinking that we do in our heads. And we know that we have this negativity bias, which is the mind's preference to think about things that are negative, or think about things how we are not, that we're in need of something, so things aren't enough. And when we get into the body, sort of somatic practices like smelling the herbs, or hearing the bird song, or feeling the water on our feet, or like going barefoot is one invitation that we ask people to do, because we immediately have a much bigger sensory experience. And when our senses are engaged, it takes us out of the head and into the body. And I like to think of it as out of the head and into your life, right? So these sensory experiences, they just become louder when we're in the natural world.
Wonderful. So that's like so many good areas. I mean, there's so many urban areas as well that people don't have access to the nature. So something like like you mentioned, of, having smaller things that would connect them, such as the sand or creating an herb garden or doing those indoor things, would be wonderful. And I know there's a lot of efforts too around in urban areas where they're building gardens and outdoor park-like settings, even up on top of buildings. There's a lot of effort into going into that. So that's wonderful. I love hearing about those stories. But if we can connect the two and create more of those spaces in urban areas, that would be amazing.
If I might add a story that you might enjoy, we developed a 6-week curriculum called Nature Therapy for Wellness, and we've thought about like the sort of the main mental health challenges that people are experiencing, and we paired that with a nature intervention, so to speak. And we took this curriculum, we brought it to different groups, and one time we were invited to bring it into an urban city environment, into a organization that was working with women that was a transitional housing. That women were coming from homelessness or from the prison system. And there, we really, to be honest with you, didn't know how it was really going to land, the 6-week group, because we also were curious about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and if the basic needs weren't met, was nature really going to be particularly helpful, was kind of a question mark for us. So we took this curriculum down there, we started connecting with these women, and lo and behold, it was such a positive experience for them. And one moment stood out when a woman told us that the park right down from where she lived, the only thing she ever thought about when it came to that park was that it was where drug trafficking was taking place. But after the 6-week group, for the first time, she looked at the park and she saw nature in the park. And it was just such a powerful thought to think that we, or this curriculum or nature itself, was responsible for helping her see that in this darkness that is this park and the drug trafficking and the pain that brings, there was also the beauty of nature can be found even in those places with this ability to see it.
Yeah, that's true. You're telling a story that is moving and powerful. That's awesome. When you talked about that, women in transition, I thought of domestic violence and that type of transition, but certainly, but I wanted to talk about one story that, it's a personal story of mine. When I was young, my parents had split up. My father had left and abandoned me and my mother was working on getting assistance from the government to help her to pay. And she found this job as a rooming house manager. And it was a lot of work because there were like 40 rooms she had to clean and rent them out and make sure there was no trouble and do all this, all with me, a little kid. And I was 4 going on 5. And I saw in the backyard, which it wasn't a nice yard, but it was a dirt yard really. And there was a garage in the back, and I was able to climb up on top of the garage. There was a tree that had mulberries, and I remember picking those mulberries and being at such peace with myself, despite the fact that my home life was ripped apart. My mother was not available for me because she was working in this foreign place. And I had this nature right there with me. And I even picked those berries, brought them into the house, and we had them with milk for breakfast. And it was like such a nice thing that I was able to do. And I think that experience helped to form my relationship with nature. What about you, Heidi? Do you have any relationships, stories about you with nature that brought you closer to this role that you play now?
I really loved your story. I was right there with you with those berries. Oh my gosh, that was a special one. I actually did not grow up in the United States. I grew up in the German-Austrian border in the Alpine region. And my dad was, growing up, he was a mountaineer and ski instructor. So we spent a lot of time in the mountains of sort of the Austrian border to southern Bavaria. And then I came to the U.S. to go to school. and kind of left all that behind. And we know how we don't know if we have something really good until it's like gone, right? And I was like, wow, I miss those mountains, because Maryland, even though people here think that there are mountains, they're really not compared with the big ones in the Alps. So I was planning a trip back to visit my family, and I had planned a trip to summit one of the mountains. And I had exercise trained for it. It was a backpacking. And so we got there, and it was August. And we started climbing up and heading up there, and we hit every weather possible. If I'm telling you every weather, I mean hail, snow, rain, sunshine. It was definitely a difficult ascent. Now, if any of you listeners have been to the Alps, you know that what's kind of unique about that is that there are huts that are at the top, or not all the way at the top, but pretty close. They're sort of these base camp huts where you can take refuge for the night. And so we made it to the hut, and it was this terrible storm. And I was really, really disappointed, because once these storms kind of set in, you don't see very far. And the views were supposed to be stunning, but the hut kind of owner was telling us, sorry, you're probably not going to see a whole lot the next day. And this fog kind of sits in, and you might as well tomorrow morning, head back down. I was so disappointed and had this sort of existential crisis where I wasn't sure about my faith and spirituality. So I kind of called out to this thing, God, and I'm like, God, if you're out there, I have a deal for you. If you make the storm disappear, and if these clouds move, and tomorrow will be beautiful, I'll give you another chance. And I fell asleep that night, and when I woke up, there was not a cloud in the sky. And I got out of this hut, and I started the final descent, and I got to the very top, and I started looking around this 360-degree view of these stunning mountains and valleys, and there were it was just one of those most awe-inspiring moments. And I realized that these moments they're so healing, and they connect us to something bigger than ourselves. And I wanted that to be part of my professional life as much as it was at that moment my personal life. And it was just sort of this amazing moment of awe that set this all in place, I would say.
Wonderful. That is just awe-inspiring. I mean, I could be there with you on that mountain, and feeling the disappointment, and, being, and then to have that. And the spirituality is something each person has. It's their own choice. And just to hear you go through that, and then have that happen where you could appreciate that powerful moment in nature. Thanks for sharing.
Oh, yeah.
So what about your clients, the people that really benefit from this? I mean, you've mentioned already that it was people that were in transitional housing, homeless, or from prisons. Is it beneficial in people in their professional lives, or personal, or just overall, or with these actual, conditions that are mental health issues?
Yeah, I think that what might be really helpful for us is to take a moment where we're going to take a trip back into our past. So when we're thinking about humans and our story, the human story doesn't start in 2023. The human story starts millions of years ago, and we have to recognize that our story, the human story, took place outdoors for 99.9% of our evolution. We, as a species, have only moved indoors in the last 200 years during the Industrial Revolution. And so your body and your brain has evolved in the outdoors, not in the indoors. So not only have we started spending most of our waking and sleeping time indoors, we've also now created a fascination with technology. So really what is messing up our nervous system is that we are living a life that is very counter to the way we evolved. And that transition of the human, or of the Homo sapien, to indoors has created a lot of mental health issues. So the one that I specialize in is anxiety disorders. And so what we see is a nervous system that is chronically agitated. It's chronically agitated because we're living in a way, we've created a society and a culture in a way that is really counter to what we need, which is the pace of nature, slowing down, giving the brain breaks, being connected to the outdoors, feeling the circadian rhythm that the sunlight brings to us, right? All of these things, we no longer do that, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to give one pretty important example. Let's just say that you wake up at 8 in the morning and the alarm goes off, and maybe let's say that the first thing you do is check your phone to see if anything occurred during the few hours you were asleep. So we check our email or whatever text, and then we might go and we make coffee and get ready for our day. And let's say then you send some emails, you check the news, you go to work, and you come back, and let's say that the last thing you do before you turn the light off is just plug in your cell phone, check one last time. So now you've been for over 12 hours asking your prefrontal cortex, your executive part of your brain, to be working. And I'm here to tell you that your brain was never designed to do that. It was not designed to work that many hours, to do that much executive functioning work. And it is stressing out our system. It is stressing out our nervous system, our way of being. We have an epidemic of anxiety and stress disorders. And so we have to remember that is just so new to our human experience, because 200 years in the grand scheme of our evolution is really brand new, that our body isn't quite oriented anymore to that. And so some of the techniques that we help people do is the mindfulness, slowing down, listening to nature, sensory oriented, getting back into the body, helping the mind not be so busy and constantly thinking and problem solving. And so really these daily, but also immersive nature experiences is what we're trying to promote for people to start integrating into their life.
Wonderful. So if you're in the area, the Maryland area, look them up. I was going to ask you about online services too. I'm in New Jersey. If I wanted to have any services with you, is there any type of referral program? Is there things at a higher level, or is it just at your local area?
So yeah, one of the things that we're doing is, we all dream big, right? We all have to have big dreams and big missions. And ours is big, and our mission is that we will train every single mental health professional to be certified nature informed. And so we've created a training that we offer to anyone who's a mental health professional or in the health or healing professions that wants to become nature informed. And they go through a training process where they then get certified. They become part of a directory. So you could put your zip code in and see if there's a nature informed mental health professional in your area who can do individual sessions or group or retreats or immersive experiences.
Wonderful. There's a huge need for this, I think, because, as you said, even, 30 years ago, we were not living life at this pace. We've come so far technologically, and it is putting us stress. Even the younger generations, the kids are, addicted to their own cell phones, and it's difficult because it's our entertainment and it's our social. And after the COVID pandemic, it was a way that we were all able to still thrive despite the fact that we were disconnected physically. But imagine a world where we could have these therapies help us. And I recently moved to a different area. I really am fortunate. I live in a park-like setting. There's a lot of people who are outside. They're more active. Most 90% of the people in town have a dog, so they're walking their dogs. It's really beautiful. The birds are singing. today was the first day that I saw a red robin, and we just had the moon that they call the worm moon. And I believe there's something to that, because the trees are now blooming, the things are sprouting, even though we're still in the 20s, in the evenings. But my whole mindset changed. I felt the pace of my brain slow down when I moved here. It was really amazing. And I'm glad we're connecting, because it's nice to go back to 2 years ago and remember that feeling that I had. I can attest to this practice. This is real. It's real.
Yeah, it is. And I love this. I heard this, and I don't know who to give credit to this, except for it was somewhere I heard this idea that we've evolved to function at the speed of life, not the speed of light, which is this idea that, technology and the sort of the society we've created, it's so fast paced. But if you look at nature and you look at the pace that nature is mirroring back to you, your internal system, your rhythm starts connecting with that pace. Your breath slows down, right? The spinning thoughts slow down, because that's what happens. We have these mirror neurons in our brain where we're mirroring what we're seeing or what's around us. And when you're in the city and there's traffic lights and there's cars speeding and there's it's just that your body then tries to mimic that too. And that's when we see people with an agitated nervous system, and they, fly off the handle quickly because the fuse is so short, because there's just not enough time to help that nervous system regulate.
So the benefits of nature-based solutions are really evident, and I just love your programs. I don't even know how I found you, but if we can get more clinicians into this training of yours, I think that's going to be a great help. I'm going to pass this on to a couple of groups that I am in, and I have a lot of spiritual people who are trained in different areas. And so I hope you don't mind. I'm going to share this with them.
That'd be wonderful. And I will say that, right, that's the big dream and the revolution that I'm trying to bring to the field of therapy, psychotherapy. And when I think about why are we, dreaming big? We want people to have tools to help regulate, and we want to bring tools of resiliency to people. But I will say that's not my only motive. I have to tell you that there's another motive here. And the motive is that I am concerned about the health of the planet. I'm concerned about the pollution, and I think there's lots of things we can agree that the earth is not the health we would wish it to be. And I believe that if nature can be my co-therapist, and I eventually take myself out of the role of therapist and then connect my client with nature as a lasting therapist, that in turn will translate into deeper care for the natural world, because nature has now been part of their healing process.
Yeah, that's a good point. If, my upbringing, I was in a city a lot of the time, and I remember my mom always saying, eat the fresh vegetables and fruits when they're in season. And we would be respectful of nature in that way, in our food choices, and we wouldn't waste anything. And, it's good to hear that a lot of people are being more mindful about our planet and about ways that they can be more resourceful. And again, I think that you have a good thing going with this nature concept as a therapy, because it is going to translate that, when and I have a teenager. When we first moved here, he was on the video games, and he's a sports kid anyway, so he would play sports. But when, we encouraged him to get out there. Oh, look, there's someone from your school. They're riding a bike, or they're running, or they're, doing things. And as a family, we would go and do hikes or walks. I mean, I have asthma. It's flaring up now, but we do things like that outside in nature. And it really does affect the quality of our lives. And so you know, I would like to send that message out to you. If you're a parent, if you have kids, you know, there has to be a balance in your life, I think, for that quality life. And if you can incorporate nature, it's really going to help to improve that quality of your life.
Yeah, I echo that. And I think that for millennia, nature was like a family member to us, right? Like you said early in your story, it supplied us with nutrition, with food, with shelter, all the clothes we wear, the community we were in, lived outdoors. Like we were deeply connected. And I think that we have disconnected because of just the way we've started organizing our society around. And now is an awakening of the consequences we've paid for that disconnect. And now there's an effort to bring us back into a deeper connection with this, in somewhat, disregarded family member that we really owe everything to. Your breath that you take, every single breath, is because of the trees and the plants. So we have to, this idea of that we're different or apart from, or even the language we use, like I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go, into the woods. No, it's all an extension of us. We're all nature. And so just that deep reconnection, I think, is the key for like sustainable health and healing.
So not only can we improve our immediate lives through the practices of involving nature in our healing and in our journeys, but we can also work toward the climate change and different things going on in the planet. I love that concept. Heidi, is there anything else that you would like to highlight to our listeners?
Yeah, I think that I just want to make people aware that Harvard Health is working on something they will call the nature pyramid. And the nature pyramid is being modeled after the food pyramid. So the food pyramid, we're kind of familiar with it. It was kind of providing guidance on what types of foods to eat and how much and throughout your day. So the food pyramid is from Harvard Health is encouraging people to think about, for your mental and physical well-being, you need the dose of nature daily, weekly, monthly, and annually. The different types of nature exposures, right? We know that a 12-minute walk daily has potential to not only as a preventative to depression and obesity and all that, but on a weekly to spend maybe an hour outdoors, all the way to once a year to taking extensive immersive experience like a national park. So this is really interesting that some of our highest institutions of learning are catching up on this, and it's providing us people with this visual to see that this is not optional. We need to find, these exposures on a daily all the way to an annual basis. And I would just want to encourage all the listeners, I like hiking in the mountains. That might not be you. You might be liking to sit on the beach by the water. That's okay. Find your nature connection, find your thread. It's all there for you to enjoy, and that enjoyment will turn into caregiving, and in that way, in a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, and I love that daily practice. Like, I know there's a lot of people who recognize the beach as being their, their place, their happy place. But Heidi, I put this book out, Emotional Strength Explained, in 21 in December, and since then, that's when I started with this radio show and helped working with children and doing a lot of different things. But I noticed in this book, which is a self-help book, it's a journal, in at least 80% of the little photos I have that are associated with the activity for the day, I have nature. This is clouds of the sky. There's one in here of the going deeper with the water. There's different photos in here that I also incorporate with nature without even having realized it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that reminder and awakening how connected, there's a biophilia, which is E.O. Wilson, who says that we are all wired, innately wired to connect with the natural world.
I love that. Well, we're going to share this message out there. And again, listeners, we have Dr. Heidi Schreiber-Pan on today, founder and executive director at Chesapeake Mental Health. They have courses, retreats, they have group outdoor therapy, and human nature healing. And as Heidi has just said, we are all wired to connect infinitely with nature. So Heidi, like I said, I'm going to share your information with the spiritual healers that I know, as well the therapists, and I love that idea of being able to put in my zip code and get some therapy to deal with the stressors in my life through nature. I love that idea.
And I just wanted to add that we have a division, the Chesapeake Mental Health, we have a division called the Center for Nature Informed Therapy. So if you put that in your search engine, that's where we have that collection of different reading materials, articles, resources, interviews on that human nature connection. And it's a division of Chesapeake Mental Health called the Center for Nature Informed Therapy.
Wonderful. Heidi, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time, sharing all that wonderful wealth of knowledge that you did about nature and how exposure to the outdoors can help our communities and help individuals be more resilient. We look forward to hearing everything you have in store. So definitely reach out to us again in terms of any new developments you want to share with us. And we're glad to have you on again.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My new book is coming out in April, so maybe I'll be able to come back and introduce my new book called The Outside Within, and it talks about a collection of stories of people that have had emotional hardship and how they found healing through their connection with nature.
Wonderful. I want to hear about that. And yes, definitely, we'd like to have you on.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you so much
for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You don't have to just go through it. You can grow through it. With Resilient You with Alicia Pozsony and Emotional Strength Explained, available now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and on my website, www.aliciapozsony.com.